The first moan wasn't hers. That's how my Thursday started. It came from her phone, which was face down but not muted, buzzing faintly between the couch cushions as I vacuumed under it. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was trying to be helpful. Dust mites apparently hate clean rugs. Then the sound. A half sigh, half choke, followed by silence. I froze. The phone vibrated again, screen lighting up with a preview. So which felt better? Winky face. I didn't even breathe. I stared at the message, unable to decide what was worse, the implication or the smug emoji at the end. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I just slid it back where I found it and finished vacuuming like a coward with a lump in his throat and a hoover in his hand. When she got back from her solo yoga, an hour later, she kissed me on the cheek like she always did, as if the ghost of someone else's fingers hadn't touched her just a few hours earlier. That night, I lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling, while she slept with one leg draped over mine like a habit she hadn't bothered breaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her awake and ask, who was he? What did he offer you that I didn't? But I didn't. Instead, I whispered the worst thing a man can admit. Was it better? She stirred, not fully awake, but enough to mumble. And then, with a sleepy, smug softness that shattered me. Very different. That was the moment I died. Not literally, obviously, but something inside me. The belief that love meant loyalty, that history meant anything, curled up and disintegrated. The next morning, I made her coffee. French press. 2 sugars, oat milk. Just like she liked it. I didn't say a word, but she did. Don't be weird today, she said casually, sliding into her robe. It was just curiosity. I needed contrast. You wouldn't get it. Oh, but I did. She'd tested something. Size. Rhythm. Whatever category her little experiment had been filed under. And now she looked at me like a familiar brand of toothpaste. Comfortable, harmless, boring. That day I skipped work. I sat in my car for 4 hours in the IKEA parking lot, just staring at couples assembling lives they hadn't yet had the chance to ruin. By the time I came home, my plan had begun to take shape. Sabina. Yes, I'm naming her now. Thought she'd explored all her options. She thought I'd stew and sulk and eventually beg for scraps of affection, like a fool too afraid to leave the table. But she forgot one thing. I'm quiet, not blind. And in exactly 1 week, I'd remind her what stunned really feels like. I didn't eat for 2 days. I told her I had a stomach bug. She nodded, barely listening, scrolling through her phone while chewing on her necklace like she always did when she was multitasking. Except now, that necklace was new. A delicate gold chain with a tiny charm that definitely wasn't for me. I noticed that detail the same way a prisoner counts window bars. She started humming in the mornings again. Little melodies. Songs I didn't recognize. It might sound stupid to you, but when you know someone's daily patterns for nearly a decade, even a hum can feel like a warning siren. Especially when it's a happy one. I watched her transform over a matter of days. Her skin had that glow she used to get after a weekend road trip. She started wearing lip gloss indoors. And the way she checked her phone? With this subtle hesitation, like the messages mattered too much to miss. One night, she came out of the shower wearing nothing but a towel, water still dripping from her collarbone, and said, almost like it was a casual observation, "You know what's wild? You can feel things stretch that you didn't even know could." I dropped my toothbrush in the sink. She giggled and walked off. That was the entire conversation. I didn't sleep that night either. The idea of her testing size difference wasn't just a theory anymore. It was confirmed. I had no names, no faces, but I had the truth, and it was enough to kill what little I had left in me. But here's where things started to shift. Because somewhere in the middle of this storm, I stopped crying and started paying attention. Sabina had always treated herself like she was the subject of a documentary, some bohemian queen of experience. But she forgot I had a memory like a damn elephant. And I started taking notes. Like how her Pilates class ended at 7, but she started getting home at 8:15. Like how she always wore the same jacket on Thursday nights, but changed into a different one before coming inside. Or how she started taking calls on the balcony, even when it was raining. That Friday, she slipped up. She left her laptop open while she showered. I didn't plan on looking, but when the screen lit up and the cursor hovered over a file titled November Compare, I couldn't help it. I clicked. It was a journal entry, dated 2 days ago, and the first line read, "You can't unfeel what deeper really feels like." My chest tightened. My hands shook. but I read every single line. She had written a review, a play-by-play breakdown of what it felt like with him versus me. Rhythm, pressure, emotional release, even post-coital comparison. It was all there, like some twisted Amazon product review. She ended it with, Elwood is the safe shell, the echo chamber, the gentle silence. The other is full volume. I didn't smash the laptop. I didn't scream. I just closed the file, cleared the recent docs, and sat down at the kitchen table, in complete silence. For a very, very long time. That was the moment something inside me shifted, not rage, not revenge, strategy. I realized Sabina thought I was static, predictable. She believed I'd stay the same while she drifted through emotional climates like some weather-chasing balloon. But I knew her better than she thought. I knew what scared her. Not violence, not exposure, not even divorce. What scared her was being irrelevant, forgettable, replaced. And I knew exactly who to call. There was someone from her past she never fully recovered from. Someone she had quietly stalked on Facebook for years, but never dared reach out to because of how things ended. Let's just say, I did. And when Sabina came home the next Thursday night, humming and smug, she found something on the kitchen table that stopped her dead in her tracks. Not evidence, not a confrontation, but an invitation. One that would lead her directly into a storm she never saw coming. And trust me, you'll want to see what happened next. She stood frozen in the doorway, her keys dangling loosely between two fingers, her eyes locked on the single white envelope placed dead center on the kitchen table. No return address, no markings, just her name, in handwriting she hadn't seen in almost a decade. I watched from the hallway, half-shadowed, heart beating so hard I thought it might knock the picture frames off the wall. She didn't even take off her coat. She just stared, as if the envelope might explode. I didn't say a word, not even when she whispered under her breath, "This can't be real." But it was. Very real. Sabina used to have this phrase when we first dated, "Some ghosts aren't dead. They're just busy." She'd say it whenever we stumbled onto old friends or memories she wasn't ready to let go of. And there was one ghost in particular that haunted her more than the others. Jules Whitman. I never met him in person. He was a myth woven into her past. A 2-year wildfire of a relationship that ended with a restraining order she claimed was misunderstood. According to her version, it was just drama, but I always suspected there was more to it. She never deleted his pictures, never unfollowed him, just buried the history beneath a layer of forced indifference. Until now. I had found him through a mutual contact while scrolling through Sabina's friends list. Yes, I snooped, sue me, and reached out under a fake name. Took less than a day for him to respond. Apparently, he'd been curious too. Curious if she still thought about him. Curious what her life looked like after she left his in flames. I didn't have to say much. Just that I was organizing a gathering of people from a shared poetry group they were once both part of. Yes, they were that kind of couple. And her name had come up. Jules jumped on it. He still had the same number. Still had old journals with her scribbled notes in the margins. Still had feelings, although now they were sour and sharpened with time. He agreed to send her a letter, just one. I didn't even read it before I slid it into the envelope and laid it out like bait. She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she sat down like her legs couldn't bear the weight. The envelope rested on her lap, while her expression changed from confusion to dread to something darker. Regret, maybe? Longing? It was hard to tell. She finally peeled it open like it might cut her. And as she read, her face turned to stone. Not anger, not shock, just blank. When she was done, she folded the letter slowly, tucked it back in, and sat completely still for what felt like hours. I stayed quiet. I needed her to feel it, to sit with it, to stew in whatever Jules had stirred up. Eventually, she stood up, walked to the sink, and dumped the letter into the garbage disposal. Then she turned to me. "You did this." I didn't lie. Yes. She didn't yell, didn't accuse, just asked one more question. "Why?" My voice cracked. "Because you think you're the only one who can explore." She scoffed. "So you're trying to make me jealous?" "No. I'm showing you what it feels like to be haunted." She laughed once. Not a real laugh, more like a defensive bark. "I'm not haunted by Jules." I raised my eyebrows. "You kept his journal." She froze. Her nostrils flared just a little. That was all the confirmation I needed. Sabina didn't realize she was as predictable as a song on repeat. She wanted contrast? She wanted difference? Fine. But she forgot that I, too, could change the script. Because the letter wasn't the end. It was the opening act. She had tested me against someone she barely knew. Someone new, shiny, physically different. But now I was introducing her to herself, to her past, to her unresolved, unhealed, unfinished chaos. And soon, I'd show her what else I had dug up. Because ghosts don't just send letters. Some of them knock on the door. She didn't sleep that night. At least, not next to me. Around 1:14 a.m., I heard the quiet creak of the hallway floorboards, then the front door clicking shut. No goodbye, no excuse. Just silence wrapped in cowardice. She was gone for hours. When she finally returned around dawn, she moved like a shadow. No lights, no sounds. But I still heard her. People always think the worst pain comes from betrayal. It doesn't. It comes from the moment they stop trying to hide it. And Sabina had officially stopped hiding. The next day, she was quieter. Not out of guilt. She was calculating. I could see it in the way she tapped her spoon against her mug. She wasn't afraid of Jules. That letter wasn't a warning, it was a trigger. I didn't know what he'd written yet, but I knew her well enough to see the signs. She was remembering, replaying, reopening a box that had been duct-taped shut and shoved into the back of her mind. I asked, "Did it say something you weren't expecting?" She didn't even look up. He remembered things you never asked about. That one sentence. I swear it burned a hole in my chest. Because she was right. I didn't ask about Jules. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to compare myself to the myth. I didn't want to hear about the motorcycle rides through rain, the wild 3 a.m. poetry readings, the music he wrote about her. I didn't want to know how deep their intimacy went, because I couldn't match that. I was the safe one, the slow one, the default. And now, she had a taste of something else again. 2 flavors, 2 eras, 2 versions of desire. But what she didn't know was that I had already opened a third door. And this one wasn't from her past. It was mine. You see, Sabina always mocked my ex, said she was too rigid, too vanilla, too afraid of the void. But Lane, yes, that was her name, was never afraid. She was precise. She was clinical with her emotions, surgical with her truths. And what Sabina never knew was that Lane had been the first person to warn me about her. I don't know why, Lane once said, but she always gives me the feeling she'd burn the house down just to feel the heat. And now, that quote echoed louder than ever. I hadn't spoken to Lane in years. We parted respectfully, mutually. She moved to the opposite coast, started teaching yoga to corporate execs who cried in her classes. But when I reached out, she answered. No hesitation. No questions. Just one line. Is it finally happening? I invited her to visit. Just for the weekend. Old friends catching up. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing crossed. But I wanted Sabina to see her. To feel that sharp stab of curiosity turned inside out. And when Lane stepped through our front door on Saturday afternoon, with that calm, unnerving grace she always had, hair longer, body leaner, voice still low and exact, Sabina's reaction was priceless. She was in the middle of arranging her bookshelf when Lane's voice carried down the hallway. Still organizing by color? You always did love the illusion of order. Sabina dropped the paperback, turned slowly, their eyes locked like 2 chess players skipping the opening moves. I introduced them with fake cheer. Sabina, you remember Lane. Her smile was so tight it looked like it hurt. Of course, the minimalist. Lane's return smile was sharper. And you're the maximalist. Still trying to taste every flavor before the cone melts? Sabina chuckled once, cold. You always did speak in metaphors. Like you were above the rest of us. Lane tilted her head. No, I just preferred my metaphors to casual disrespect. You could feel the temperature in the room drop by 10 degrees. And I just poured tea. Slowly, deliberately, hands steady for the first time in days. Because Sabina had tested difference. She had explored other sizes, other energies. But now she was in the room with someone who knew me before she ever learned my name. And she didn't know what to do with that. Dinner was brutal. They sparred politely over hummus and grilled vegetables, throwing passive-aggressive darts with each sentence. Lane never raised her voice. Sabina never blinked first. But me? I said almost nothing. Because I was letting the room speak for me. Letting her see, in silence, that I could be the one rediscovered, reclaimed, desired. And when Lane left the next morning, hugging me a little too long in the doorway, Sabina stood at the top of the stairs, arms folded, expression unreadable. When the door closed, she didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me, as if trying to decide whether I was still hers. But I wasn't so sure anymore. And the moment I told her what I'd discovered in her secret email folder, everything shattered. She followed me into the kitchen after Lane left, barefoot, her footsteps slow like a predator choosing not to rush the kill. I didn't turn around. I could feel the weight of her stare against my back while I rinsed 2 untouched teacups from the night before. Steam rose, silent and hissing. "You planned that," she said finally. I placed the cups in the rack, dried my hands, and faced her. And she crossed her arms. "That was manipulative. Bringing her here. Flaunting her." I gave a dry laugh. "Manipulative? You're sleeping with someone else. I introduced you to tea and conversation." Sabina blinked, once, then twice. She hated being called out without an emotional ramp. She wanted a fight, not logic. "I'm not sleeping with anyone," she snapped. I walked past her. "You're right. You're comparing. You're documenting like you're building a case study. I read your notes." That stopped her. Dead still. "My what?" I turned back toward her. "The file. November compare. You left it open." Her breath caught, just for a second, and I saw something flash across her face that I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. "You went through my stuff?" "Your laptop was unlocked." "I didn't hack the Pentagon, Sabina." She opened her mouth, then closed it. It was rare to see her at a loss for words. I almost felt bad. Almost. "I just wanted to understand," I said, quieter now. "I needed to know what I was failing at." She looked away. And that's when I said it. The line I'd held in for weeks. "But here's the thing. While you were comparing me to strangers, I found something I wasn't supposed to find." Her head snapped back. "What?" I walked over to the dining table, lifted a black USB stick from a drawer, and held it up. "You forgot to remove your sync history, your cloud folders, your draft emails." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You went into my email?" "No," I said. "I went into yours." Sabina's face turned pale. I took a breath and laid it out carefully, like detonating a mine. "There's a folder called Sizes and Shadows. Inside were draft messages you wrote to people with usernames I've never seen before. Men, women, people you've met in person. Some you haven't. You've been reaching out to people specifically to ask about what it's like to be with someone physically different. You asked them about depth, pressure, positions. You even asked one of them for videos." She didn't deny it. She didn't have to. Her knees hit the edge of the table, and she sank into the nearest chair, like her body was shutting down from within. "I never sent them," she said, barely audible. I nodded. "You didn't need to. You were already mentally cheating. You don't need a bed to betray someone. A mind is enough." She buried her face in her hands. I thought she might cry, but instead, she laughed. A low, bitter, cracked laugh. The kind that doesn't sound like amusement at all. "I didn't realize you had it in you," she whispered. I didn't speak. I let the silence dig in deep. Because the truth was, I hadn't known I had it in me either. I thought I was the type who'd grovel, apologize for not being enough, beg for her to return to me emotionally. But instead, I'd grown cold. I wasn't trying to win her back anymore. I was showing her what she had broken. And now, she finally saw the cracks. After several minutes, she looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. "So what now?" I took the USB stick and dropped it into my pocket. "Now," I said, "now we find out how far you were really willing to go." She looked confused. So I leaned in. "Because you didn't just write to strangers, Sabina. One of the people you messaged? I know them." She went still again, and then she whispered, "Who?" I shook my head. "You'll find out when they respond. Or maybe they already did." I walked out of the kitchen and left her sitting there in silence, the weight of uncertainty pressing on her like a vice. Because now she wasn't just haunted by what she'd done. She was haunted by what I knew. And what would happen when it all unraveled? She didn't speak to me for 2 full days. No snide remarks. No cryptic metaphors. No passive-aggressive compliments about how quiet the house felt. Just absence. The kind that makes you forget you're not living alone. She moved like a ghost through our home, doors closing gently, music playing only through headphones now. Meals were eaten at odd hours. Conversations were replaced with post-it notes. "Marvin needs food. I paid the gas bill. Don't forget your dentist appointment." Each one a soft slap in the face. And for a moment, I almost believed she was going to keep it that way. Let the silence rot us from the inside out. Until I walked into the living room Tuesday night and found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by every journal she had written since we got married. Torn open, pages splayed like bodies at a crime scene. Her eyes were red, but dry. Her hands were shaking slightly as she flipped through one, stopped, then threw it across the room like it had betrayed her. She didn't look at me when she said, "It was him, wasn't it?" My stomach tightened. "Who?" "The one I emailed. The one you said responded." I didn't answer, but my silence was enough. She let out a bitter, breathy laugh and stood up. "Of course it was. You've always had this way of circling back to the people I pretend don't matter." I crossed my arms. "And you've always had a way of pretending your experiments don't have consequences." Her eyes narrowed. "You read my mind, invaded my privacy, exposed something that wasn't even real yet." I took a slow breath, walked closer. "Wasn't real? You asked strangers about sex with people who weren't me. You wrote out fantasies, compared our intimacy like you were reviewing furniture. That's not fantasy. That's premeditated betrayal." She blinked hard. I could see her fighting the urge to cry or scream, maybe both. "I never acted on it," she said quietly. "I was curious. I was lost. I thought maybe if I understood what I was missing, I'd appreciate what I had." That one hit harder than she probably expected. "You had everything," I said. "You had a man who worshipped you, who gave you space, who didn't shame you for your weird obsessions, your phases, your retreats into yourself. I gave you room to breathe, Sabina. And you used that room to set a trap and see if you could fall in love with someone else." She shook her head. "It wasn't love." "I know," I interrupted. "It was data. It was comparison. Like I was one of 100 samples in your test group." Her voice cracked. "You make it sound like I'm some emotionless scientist." "Because you were." I shouted, louder than I meant to. "You wrote down notes about how I kiss. You logged how I touch you. You even rated my silence. What else did you need to measure before deciding whether I was good enough to stay?" She flinched at that, and for a long, jagged moment, we stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by her open journals and the silence of a marriage that had been dissected to death. Then she asked it, the question I'd both expected and dreaded. "What did he say?" "The one who responded." I paused, not because I didn't know, but because saying it aloud felt like unlocking something I might not be able to contain. So I told her the truth. "He said he never forgot you, but not in the way you wanted." She frowned. I continued, slower now. "He said you once made him feel like he wasn't real unless he amazed you. That the second he became familiar, you treated him like white noise. Like background ambience. He said being with you was like constantly auditioning to stay in the room." She swallowed hard. Her hands dropped to her sides. I stepped forward. "He said he read your email and didn't feel flattered. He felt studied. Like a subject in a petri dish. Like nothing you feel is ever raw. It's all processed through layers of intellectual detachment until it's safe for you to label." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. So I delivered the final line. "He told me, quote, I hope she finds what she's looking for. But she won't. Because nothing is ever enough when you think love is a laboratory." She collapsed into the armchair like her bones had betrayed her. For once, she didn't have a metaphor. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't just ashamed. She was terrified, because all her carefully constructed control had shattered, and she didn't know how to pick it back up. But I wasn't done. There was one more ghost she didn't know I had contacted. And this one wasn't from her past. It was someone from mine. Someone who still carried a story Sabina thought I'd buried. She didn't ask who the second person was. Not at first. But I saw it eating at her, like static in the background of every room we stood in. Her eyes would linger on my phone screen a little longer. Her questions started folding inward. "Where are you going?" Became, "What time will you be home?" Which became, "Will you be eating dinner with me tonight?" The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who built her identity on detachment was now studying me, not out of curiosity this time, but fear. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about containment. She knew she had awakened something in me that she couldn't put back in the box. And it scared her. The final push came Friday night. I had just gotten back from a long walk. Nothing sinister, just time to breathe, to think, to figure out what part 7 of my unraveling marriage even looked like. When I stepped into the house, I found her standing by the fireplace, holding a photo album we hadn't touched in years. It was open to a page with a woman she never liked. Cora, my ex-fiancée. Sabina looked up slowly, like she'd been rehearsing a monologue but forgot the first line. "You reached out to her," she said flatly. I didn't confirm it, but I didn't deny it either. She closed the book, her movements stiff. Why? What does she have to do with any of this? I walked past her and sat on the armrest of the couch. Because you've convinced yourself I've never had anything passionate, that I've only ever been safe, predictable, that you were my first taste of wild. She scoffed, bitter. I was. No, I said, calm but firm. Cora was. Sabina flinched like I'd slapped her. And then I told her everything. How Cora and I were supposed to get married when we were 25. How she was impulsive, sharp-tongued, laughed like thunder, kissed like she was breaking rules. How she broke my heart when she called off the wedding 2 weeks before the date. Not because of another man, but because she said I wasn't ready for a woman like her. I told Sabina how I spent years rebuilding myself from that crater. How I had chosen her, Sabina, not because she was a downgrade, but because she wasn't chaos. She was measured, controlled, precise, everything I thought I needed. Until that precision turned into dissection. Sabina stared at the carpet, her jaw trembling. Why now? Why bring her back? I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Because I needed to remember that I wasn't always this. That I wasn't always the man you made me believe I am. Boring, quiet, not enough. Her voice cracked. You are enough. No, I said softly. Not to you. You don't want enough. You want contrast. You want emotional whiplash. You want to feel something so foreign and new that you can write about it, label it, and file it away like a discovery. She stepped back like the words physically hit her. Then she whispered the line I'll never forget. I didn't realize you still had fire in you. I stood up. That's the problem, Sabina. You didn't realize anything until you were no longer the only one holding the match. She sat down slowly on the edge of the coffee table. I could see the walls inside her collapsing. She looked small, not weak, but exposed. The armor she'd worn for years was peeling off in layers. Then she asked the one question I never expected to hear from her. Did she still want you? Silence. I let it linger, let it dig under her skin. And then I answered, honestly. She said she regretted walking away when I was still trying to be someone for her. Because now, I finally became the man she always believed I could be. Sabina's breath caught. Her hands trembled in her lap. And then, finally, the dam broke. She cried. Not the cinematic tears she used to shed in the shower after long arguments. These weren't curated sobs. These were ugly, gasping, full-body sobs that came from someplace so deep inside her it shocked both of us. I ruined this, she choked out. I thought if I could compare it to everything else, I'd appreciate it more. I didn't say anything. What was left to say? She wasn't just realizing she had destroyed the marriage. She was realizing she had destroyed her idea of it, too. Because while she was off seeking size, rhythm, and difference, she forgot one crucial truth. You can't compare love like fabrics on a shelf. You can't test drive people. And you definitely can't measure a man's worth in contrast to strangers when you never learned how to value him on his own. But the most brutal part? I had one final thing to show her. A message she sent. That didn't go where she thought it did. The house was painfully still the next morning. Not quiet, still. Like time had slowed, like sound itself was holding its breath. I stood in the doorway to the bedroom and watched Sabina curled on her side, eyes open but unfocused, her fingers gripping the edge of the blanket like she might float away if she let go. No mascara, no posture, just her, raw, unscripted, finally real. I read the message, I said softly. She blinked, swallowed. Which one? The one you thought went to Casey_studio, I replied. But it didn't. You typoed the email. It came to me. Her face drained of color. I walked over to the desk and placed a printed sheet of paper in front of her. I had highlighted just one line, the last line. He's a good man. I don't think I deserve him, but I don't know how to stop looking for what's missing. She sat up slowly, staring at it like it might bite her. Her mouth opened, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but no words came. So I sat down beside her and said what neither of us expected. I think we both lost ourselves in this marriage. She looked at me, eyes glossy. I thought I needed to test everything to know what was real. I nodded. And I thought being safe meant I was being strong. But being safe doesn't mean being small. Her lip trembled. Why didn't you leave me? The question sat heavy between us. I wanted to, I said honestly. So many times. But not because I stopped loving you. I wanted to leave because I stopped loving how you made me feel. Like I was a placeholder. Like I was the beige wall behind the art you were chasing. Her head dropped. I'm sorry. It wasn't whispered. It wasn't dramatic. It was just real. And for the first time in what felt like years, I believed her. She didn't apologize to escape the consequences. She apologized because she had finally arrived at the wreckage and realized she was the one who had lit the match. I reached out and took her hand. I don't know where we go from here, I said, but I know we can't go back. She nodded. I don't want to go back. We sat there for a long time, just holding hands, surrounded by broken pieces and quiet honesty. In the weeks that followed, we didn't magically heal. There were long nights, honest talks, couples therapy, boundaries, vulnerabilities I didn't even know I was allowed to have. She deleted the folders, the email accounts, the notes. She didn't just say she was done comparing. She showed me. Bit by bit, we began rebuilding. Not the old marriage, but something new. Something that didn't rely on her chasing difference or me pretending I was unshakable. We stopped testing each other and started seeing each other again. One morning, as we walked Marvin through the neighborhood, Sabina stopped and squeezed my hand. I used to think you were gentle because you were afraid to break things, she said. Now I know you're gentle because you've survived being broken. I smiled. And for the first time in a long, long while, it wasn't out of bitterness. It was real. We're still healing, still figuring it out. But now, she no longer needs contrast to understand what she has. And me? I finally stopped wondering if I was enough. Because now I know. I always was. She just had to grow enough to see it.